Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Brief. Today, we're very fortunate to have with us Aysha Abdullatif, who is SVP of Marketing and a franchisee for Spherion Atlanta. Aysha, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you get us started by telling a little bit about your background and what you're up to lately?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for the invitation, Chris. And a little bit of background about me. I've been in staffing and recruiting, connected to marketing and communications now for over 15 years. And 2 years ago, I came across an opportunity to be able to open and build my own office within under the Spherion umbrella here in the greater Atlanta area. So we're very fortunate to be providing full temporary temp to hire and direct hire across multiple industries in the Atlanta market. We have sister offices across the US. And a fun fact about us is our parent company is Ronstad, which is a global staffing organization a lot of folks are familiar with.
Indeed. So tell us, go back in time and tell us like where I know you have a very interesting background, worked in talent a ton, but tell us a little bit about your journey. Because if I'm not mistaken, you actually started out in as an account person in marketing, and even were a digital media planner, and then account
Right.
director along the journey. So tell us a little bit about your background there.
Yeah, of course. Well, when I entered the workforce, it was that tricky time, that '08 economic bubble, and wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I worked for a PR company that was in the healthcare space, and I was fortunate to have an opportunity to join a startup that has now gotten much bigger and much more familiar as a name, Flickster and Rotten Tomatoes. So I moved from Atlanta to New York and wanted to get into digital advertising because that was at that point where we were really starting to use our phones more, iPads, tablets, understanding how do we advertise, how do we capture attention on a smaller screen that is in people's pockets and book bags. So that was a really great opportunity. And I joke, as most people in staffing and recruiting do, it's not something you go to college for. It's not something that you go to job fairs looking for. However, having that background in the tech space, when I moved back to Atlanta, it seemed to be the right fit because I understood how we utilize UX designers, front end developers, content marketing. I understood that space and I understood how to apply that back to organizations. And I joke sometimes with marketing agencies that marketing agencies and staffing and recruiting are very similar because when an organization is going to use a marketing agency, that's because they don't have those specializations internally to support the initiatives or the projects. And that's very similar when an organization comes for any need, whether they're looking to focus on a temporary project or they're looking to add additional headcount. However, they want to be a bit more cautious or careful. They want to be more efficient. There's multiple reasons, as you know, why people would use staffing and recruiting services. But I was fortunate to just be given an opportunity to lean in, and I realized that this is a really cool way to connect with people and understand multiple business layouts and how companies grow. And now, after a certain amount of years, you start to see cycles. I wouldn't use the word trend so much, but I'm sure you feel the same, Chris. Things are cyclical, and everything kind of loops back around full circle eventually.
Indeed. Um, Going way back, though, you actually got your bachelor's from Georgia Institute of Technology, but you
Go Jackets.
the degree. I'm curious. How did you end up in a history, technology, and society degree? I'd never heard of that kind of a degree. It sounds
That
very
is
interesting.
unique to Georgia Tech. That
Okay.
is unique to Georgia Tech. I started off as an international affairs major, thinking I was going to be pre-law, and as we all know, man plans and God laughs. And I ended up switching majors because I'm a huge history buff. I'm a believer you have to know where you came from to know where you're going. And I realized after I was already enrolled at Georgia Tech, you can only receive a bachelor's of science even if you were a history major. So the reason it says history, technology, and sociology, that's because in society, that is because it is a bachelor's of science. There are no liberal arts classes whatsoever. I went there and I was like, my friends at Emory and at University of Georgia, Like they have arts, they have this. They said, this is an engineering school.
Right.
And that was when, and my younger sister, actually, she just received her PhD from
Nice.
Georgia Tech, and she was an engineer, an engineering major. However, for me, coming out of school with that degree in a really tough, economic market, I had to really kind of understand, where are my strengths, where are things I enjoy doing. I enjoy that the marketing, the communications, that PR piece. And then I saw how that translated back into people, and really helping support individuals put their best foot forward with an organization, and vice versa, understanding those organizational layouts. I think Georgia Tech really helped from that analytical piece of it, because part of their requirements, they require very specific classes of computer science and economics that maybe most universities wouldn't require for a history major.
Right. No, that makes sense.
But
Well,
that was
that's
a great question.
no, I always find it fascinating because as you said, we're so the way that people decide what degree and what university even to go
Right.
to, it's so vast and varied. And certainly an undergrad degree, it is about being worldly. Even when you've got, yours is a bachelor's of science, you did have some stuff, that history and stuff that rounded you out. And
Sure.
the degree to which it would apply to an actual job after 4 years, it gives you that rigor, that sense of like how to prepare for things, how to, but it doesn't necessarily make you a great marketer or a great engineer or any of
Right.
the kind of specifics. That's where, advanced degrees and other programs kind of get you to that final marker of really truly being there. And even then, there's a big difference always between the academic world and the practical world, with
Mhm.
especially with the pace of change.
Mhm.
So that fascinating. And then you had your own agency. You were a CMO and founder of is it
A
iWorld?
World.
A
Yes,
World.
A
Okay.
World, yes. And with Spherion, A World has kind of quietly coexisted. With that agency, funny enough, Chris, all of my clients have been in the staffing and recruiting space.
Right.
So obviously, when I opened Spherion, there was a bit of a conflict of interest with some of my previous clients. However, I really enjoyed understanding, in staffing and recruiting specifically, it is a mixed audience that you're reaching, right? You have that
Right.
B2B element. However, you also have the candidate side as well, that you need to be able to market opportunities to. And because I worked in that space when I opened my agency, it really made sense that I understood the gaps from from the sales side. I had been in a business development role, and then from the marketing and the digital side of, how can we bring this industry up to speed on just some of just the very basic components that I saw tech and software companies being early adopters of.
Yeah. 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 Well, let's now turn to the staffing specific realm. I mean, it's probably never been as complex of a marketplace as it is these days, between the stuff that's
Right.
going on in Washington
Right.
and just AI and even the way AI sorts candidates,
Yep.
and the systems that now go through processing that, and the organizations are now starting to think differently about talent, not only the need for full-time versus temp, but how do they
Sure.
actually harness that? So talk to us a little bit about what you see as like some of the bigger trends and emerging kind of things that you really help people think about, both the clients you serve and finding the right talent, but also the people you talk to that are out there searching.
Sure. Right. No, I mean, I think you hit the nail right, right initially, of talking about what's happening on a federal level. A lot of my clients in Georgia, obviously, in the manufacturing and supply chain logistics space, have talked about tariffs.
Yep.
And unfortunately, tariffs is just a piece of the business that they have to consider. That, however, that's not going to take away from the way that they're looking at their workforce,
Yeah.
right? And then with AI, that's a whole different topic, But at the same time, though, it is looking at how are we harnessing AI as a staffing organization, and how are we putting that forward to the client partnerships we serve. For myself, I'm a tester of everything. I joke marketing is a science. We're always testing. There's no specific formula like the way Coca-Cola is made that'll give you a recipe for absolution every single time. And so I want to talk a little bit more about AI because at Spherion Atlanta, and you may have seen it on my LinkedIn too, we have built a proprietary AI tool that has been our biggest differentiator in Atlanta, and it's called Rise AI. And when I look at the AI chatbots, I look at AI screening. There's concerns, of course, around ethics and quality, and is this just another way of calling it an ATS system? An ATS system is that automated talent system that people feel when they apply to a big organization and they get rejected because of specific keywords their resume didn't have. Is AI just another form of that? And for me, I really like looking at AI from how can we as humans, as individuals, how can that help us work more efficiently, work smarter? And so I don't think AI has to replace what we're doing in staffing and recruiting. And I say this, Chris, because 50% of the reason you hire someone is because of a culture fit. It's
Hmm.
because of a behavioral interview. We
Yeah.
really lean in on behavioral interviewing.
Hmm.
We have a whole vertical dedicated to nonprofits. We've worked with nonprofits on a national level that are headquartered in Atlanta. And so 50% is really like the mission. Are you embodying the values? Are you going to be a culture fit within our existing team?
Yeah.
And then the other 50%, the technical skill sets, that's when we look at our Rise AI tool. And what that does is that helps us understand the gaps that are missing on someone's resume in connection to the job description. And then what that will do is help generate for our recruiters very specialized questions within that piece, because as much as our recruiters internally have specialities by industry, at the same time, if someone is trying to hire an iron welder temporarily for their firm versus a project manager that understands construction on a hospitality level, hospitality, steel construction, those are two very different things when you're interviewing.
Yeah.
And you need different certifications and different types of experience. So, what our AI tool does is it separates those gaps for the recruiter, because again, thinking back to us as people, we're not perfect.
Hmm.
We don't put everything in our resume because no one wants to read 20 pages
Right.
of your background. And so if there are gaps there that are missing, we ask those questions to understand, is this something that you're capable of doing and you didn't have it on your resume?
Mm.
Is this something that you can expand your experience on? Because when we present those candidates to our client partners, again, one of our other differentiators is doing things differently in our industry, because oftentimes people think of recruiters as resume pushers.
Yeah.
Most times people will say, a staffing agency sends me a resume with a couple of bullet points, maybe a quick write up. This is why they're so great. This is why you should interview them. And for me, I feel like there was a lot of depth missing behind that. And that's what our team really looked at from a technology perspective is there's no meat behind what we're doing, and we're doing a lot behind the scenes.
Yeah.
If we're interviewing 40 people and presenting you 3, sending 2 bullet points is not doing them justice as to
Right.
how they made it through that. So what our AI will do is it'll take a transcription of the interview, post going through all of that type of vetting, and it'll generate a candidate profile. And these candidate profiles are great because they're visually pleasing, easy to read, and they also target some of the Q&A that's covered in the interviews, the depth, the strengths, the weaknesses, the why. Why are they a good fit for
Yeah.
X organization? Why do they align with your mission and values? And that has been the reason why we were, awarded. We received a Moxie Award this past August in Georgia. We were awarded top recruitment firm in Georgia last year by Corporate Visions. We're the most organically awarded staffing firm, but I also really strongly believe in brand reputation. And I'm sure you feel the same, Chris,
Yeah.
when you're considering, partnerships and clients. We have the strongest and highest brand reputation in our industry, and that's just per reputation.com. I didn't make that up for a soundbite. And so I say, when we go into any client partnership, how can we carry that forward? We have to honor what we're doing and carry that forward to the partnerships, because everything that's happening, all the noise in our space, with all the different layers and complexities, recruiters are kind of getting a bad rap sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it's also like agencies, right? In marketing,
Right.
I joke that, in the US, there's, depending on which source you look at, there's between 30,000 and 100,000 agencies.
Right.
And the distinction between them is hard for clients to decide about. But because there are so many, by default it's almost a commodity, right? And I would say staffing has a similar kind of symptom that you have to fight through, and you have
Hmm.
to have that distinction. But
Hmm.
it's also earned every day, right? You can't
Right.
you can't really rely on what you did last week as a foundation for what you're going to be hired for next, because the market's changing that fast.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things in any business, as you know, Chris, is to say, well, we've always done it that way.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's when you kind of have to poke further. And I think that the content that your agency Model B has put out, that's been your biggest differentiator,
Yep.
right? In the types of conversations and connections that you're generating to set yourself apart.
Yeah. Yeah. I have the good fortune of being connected to a lot of academicians, and I get asked to guest lecture. And one of the things I always end up in the conversation with the students afterwards, because we talk about whatever topic I've been asked to talk about. What's it like in the agency world, et cetera.
Right.
And they always ask, like, so how should I get my job? I want to get a job. How do I get it? What's that look like?
Yeah.
One of the things I want to just echo, because you said that 50% of it's culture fit, right? And,
Hmm.
and I tell them two things. You have to be clear about what role you want and why,
Hmm.
because there's too many people that are saying, I'll do whatever it takes. Like,
Right.
and that's just like a sea of sameness. I need somebody that says, I want to be an account person. I want to be a planner, because you can
Right.
always get in and pivot once you're in, but you can't be ambivalent on the front end. The second thing is dig hard into the different agencies that are out there and understand their culture, snoop them on the web, look at their socials, look at their
Yeah.
employees' socials,
Do your homework.
do
Yeah.
your homework, and you should know where they go together and have a drink. You should know what like sports leagues they have teams in. You should
Yeah.
know all of the things that you can know, because that'll help you decide if they don't have those things,
Hmm.
that's not the right place for you if that's what you're seeking, because it really, it's a defining factor. And yes, you should look at Glassdoor and, Agency Spy and other places like
Hmm.
that. But
Hmm.
frankly, it's a lot easier to find the complaints there than it
Hmm.
is the real culture. And,
Right. Absolutely.
especially you get past 50 people, and you're going to have people that are upset and frustrated.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
digging is
Yeah.
important. So from your perspective, what do you suggest people do to really like understand their cultural needs, and how they then can look at companies and make sure there's a good fit?
Yeah, well, I really like the advice that you're giving and putting out the good word for around homework and research around that. And also, when our recruiters are asking these questions, I know the biggest conversation in this post-COVID world is the job remote? Is it hybrid? And that's, I think, one of the pieces that's unique about Spherion Atlanta and our sister offices is we're looking at local, because we know first and foremost, any job you're going to accept, that commute is going to play a determining factor in your quality of life,
Yep.
your quality of happiness, and retention as far as how long you're going to stay. And that's actually something we include in our candidate profiles is the joke in Atlanta is it takes an hour to get anywhere in
Right.
Atlanta, being
Right.
in Atlanta.
Yep.
And so first and foremost, we want to look at that, because with some of the contingent workforce, the temporary contractors we work with, they don't always have reliable transportation. So we have to really evaluate first and foremost, do you have transportation to get to work reliably, whether short term or long term? What does that commute look like? What do the hours look like? Because again, some companies are becoming more flexible, right? Oh, instead of 8 to 5, if you want to do 7 to 4 or 9 to 6, like we want to know from the candidate side, what are the most important factors just from a baseline before we even get into culture, before
Right.
we even get into size of teams, individual contribution versus team contributions. I feel like that is the baseline nowadays in the return to work, return to the office
Yeah.
trends that we're seeing a lot. Because the pendulum has swung more towards the employer's side, it's of course fair to say the majority of roles we're working on are in person. And that is something to qualify, especially when we have candidates that that don't live in Atlanta, and maybe they're looking either for an opportunity to relocate, or maybe they don't even want to relocate and they're just
Right.
hoping that this large organization in Atlanta is utilizing a remote workforce. And
Mhm.
so that's the first thing that we need to uncover before we get into looking at the type of work style, the type of work setting, the environment, and then from there we get into the mission and the culture. And I've jokingly done, sometimes I'll step in to help on the interview prep side, and I will step in sometimes on the interview prep because I know my clients so well, and I'll joke and say, how do you feel about the color red? Because everybody loves embodying their logo color, and you're going to see a lot of red, and that can sometimes open up a connection to say, oh well, I had someone tell me one time, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. Red is our flag. I said, oh, wow, I learned something new. She said, I love the color red. I have so much red to be wearing. And then on the flip side, sometimes people will say, you know what? I went to Clemson. We are orange. I
Right.
love orange. And then I'll joke, I'll say, well, we're orange at Spherion. Have you thought about staffing and recruiting? So even when you think about things like color theory, from that side of it, that can play a part into a candidate's satisfaction and a culture fit from there. Because when they go into the interview, sometimes wearing something to connect them back to that company, like what you were just saying with a team sport or something as simple as the connecting on the color side, that helps make that first bridge, right? That
Yeah.
first spark of, is this going to be the right person for the role?
Right. Right. From from your company's perspective, what percentage of your staffing is in white collar versus gray collar versus blue collar?
Well, we've really leaned into the professional white collar staffing in Atlanta
Mhm.
because of those differentiators I mentioned earlier, needing to do things a bit differently when the candidate market gets a bit saturated and organizations get overwhelmed with, over 100 applications for an accounting and finance role. That's when we can really step in and help on the efficiency and quality side. However, Spherion as a brand, we're known in the light industrial space. So the blue collar, the more on the warehouse and facility side, that's still about 40% of our business. So we're
Okay.
about 60-40 right now.
Got it.
And it's just a mixed bag. However, the most unique piece about us that I see we do differently is the fact that we can support both.
Right.
We have recruitment capabilities to support the blue collar business that's happening in the facilities and in the warehouses, and at the same time understanding those details and nuances and how that translates into hiring an operations manager or an HR or chief of staff. Those types of roles on the professional white collar side, that's the same organization. And when I talk to clients that we're just having a discovery call and they're working with 8 different staffing agencies, my first question is, how are you managing that? And are they adding value?
Yeah.
Because when I spoke on the nonprofit vertical, I joke that if we're not able to provide any value to your organization, blue collar or white collar, we're running a nonprofit without that 501(c)(3) status, and I'm not trying to do that.
Yeah.
We're truly wanting to find you the right candidates, or we're spinning our wheels and we're doing you a disservice. We're wasting your time.
Right, right, right. With, you talked about return to office. We've done a fair amount of advice and counsel to clients that are exploring those kinds of shifts from, the post-COVID era. And our thinking is offices are great. if
Uh-huh.
you've made it valuable to have people be together,
Uh-huh.
having it be a containment strategy, right? About I can oversee and watch them
Mhm.
and make sure they're
Right.
working is a
Right.
terrible idea. Um, Instead, having a culture that, I mean, I've talked to so many people that have been, part of big enterprises that have now mandated return to office, and they go
Mhm.
in and do Zoom
Right.
meetings from their cube. And it's like,
Yeah.
why am I driving, and all these things? Whereas the organizations that reformulate the reason and the value proposition of being
Mhm.
together, to make it more about, collaboration, about, connecting, about community, about culture, and to really foster that. And I'm not talking about foosball and,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
those kinds
Well,
of
no
things.
one cares about how many ping pong tables you guys
Right.
have. I
Right.
agree with you, Chris.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
what are you seeing in that regard? Are you seeing companies get smarter about that kind of thing in terms of, helping people feel like there's a purpose for coming back to the office other than just overlord viewpoints of, proximity?
Yeah, yeah. I agree. It's been a bit of a mixed bag. However, the stronger organizations, they're the ones that are really understanding how to utilize having that in-office piece. And I see it too because there are times where you may need your staff or your team to take on a different role than what they're typically used to, right?
Yeah.
It could be something like swag came in for an event or the facility side is going through inventory, right? When you're in office and you can get to know different teams and be able to shift and pivot a bit and say, you know what? Yeah, we can do an all hands and help support this role or this team. That only happens in office.
Yeah.
I will say that, of course, there are still going to be organizations, and that comes back to their culture and values and the way that they just run operations on, usually a typical Monday through Friday work week. Of course, there are still organizations that are not being intentional and thoughtful, and they're just saying, "Okay, we're all back in the office. We're paying this office lease. We have this office
Right.
space. Everybody needs to have a desk." And the best organizations are the ones that are harnessing it because honestly, that's what's going to enhance productivity.
Yeah.
When they talk about productivity, when they talk about wanting to maybe lean out their workforce because of, things happening economically, being a bit more cautious to hire, what's your current team looking like? I would say one of my favorite pieces that I've heard come through this is I had a client of mine talk about walking meetings.
Mm.
And I was like, "Walking meetings? But you guys, like, where are you walking to?" And she had told me, "You know what? The meeting is right after lunch. We're all very kind of like slow and sluggish. So we just go and do just around the building. It's 8 of us, and it's a really great way to just stretch our legs, talk about the agenda, have our agenda maybe, or have the things that we need to talk about, but we do it right after lunch and it's been a game changer." And
Yeah.
I hear stuff like that. And what I like to do is try to carry that forward. So when I'm talking to another organization that maybe isn't utilizing it to that degree, I'll tell them, "Hey, I heard about this from another client and they had great results.
Yeah.
Have you thought about trying it out?" And again, going back I think to the marketing side in us, Chris, it's like try it out. Like what's the risk? What do you
Yeah.
have to lose?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. So, you know, when you think about I mean, AI is, and you've touched on it, AI is such a factor. And we use AI a ton and we advise clients around ways to do it. We also are very careful to encourage them to think of ways to use it that it is playing to the strength of the tool rather
Mhm.
than trying to inject it in the process they've used for ages, which actually
Right.
diminishes the power of that tool. Um,
Right.
from and I think it's, the notion of creating these profiles for your advisors makes a ton of sense. That's like super valuable. And it's one of its strengths, right? Is
Mhm.
organizing data and context. um, that actually then gives time back to your folks to really get to know the person
Mhm.
and to find that human side. Are there other things, and as you think about both the candidate and the hiring manager, that you know the way that AI has played a role is actually lifting up the human side of the equation?
Yes, yes. So I love where you were leading this to, Chris, because as I was listening to your thoughts on the AI piece of it, I agree wholeheartedly. You know, I always feel like we're trying to calm candidates down that are getting a bit too negative. Like AI is not replacing all of our jobs, and AI can help empower both sides of the hiring space, right? Save a bit of time and understanding, is this the role the right fit for you? You know what those gaps look like up front in your resume, because our tool will have a scoring system and let us know that match percentage. And then being able to be more present. I think of AI even something as simple as phone services and virtual meetings that offer automatic transcription and note taking.
Hmm.
I used to, when was it, more than 10 years ago, I used to have clients using temporary transcribers, to get their
Yep.
meeting notes, and then that obviously that's gone away.
Right.
But then looking at how AI can really help lean into the enhancement of the overall quality of work.
Yep.
You still need to have that human element. And when we put these candidate profiles, we're not sending a resume. The resume is still linked at the bottom or attached, but oftentimes when you're able to see what that profile snapshot looks like, you don't need the AI.
Yeah.
And then the candidate also feels pretty secure in everything that was covered in an interview. Did we miss anything? Hey, take a look at these notes. AI generated, yes, but take a look, and if you feel like we missed something, let us know. On the flip side, we've tested out AI for screening calls, right? Because a screening call is that initial step before an actual weighty interview.
Mm.
And I've even tested it out with an AI bot to screen me for a role. And it's frustrating. It's like, pressing zero for the operator on a
Right.
customer
Right.
service
Right.
call. I don't see that replacing the way we do screening interviews by any means. And whenever companies are talking about AI, and I'm sure you probably have similar conversations in the sense of, okay, what are you, when AI has such this big ambiguous word right now, what are you hoping to get out of it? Like, what piece of your business do you feel like there are gaps, or that where is it you're trying to insert it? Let's look at that first, because it can do really cool stuff with data
Yeah.
and analytics. It can give you a lot of great information about your employees, past, current, and hopefully future. But again, it's like, where are you trying to insert it? Like, what is it that you need? What's the problem first before we go in talking about, Gemini and Chat GPT and all of those basics.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had the good fortune of working with large teams and diverse teams and global teams and hired lots of different people, and managed them over time. I always think of it as an ingredient uh, strategy. Like, you have
Oh,
to
I
be
like that.
very,
Yeah.
very conscious of, for me anyway,
Yeah.
the my belief is that you don't I never want, in fact, part of my hiring strategy is always to find unique personalities that create dimension to the team and
Yeah.
and distinction. And I remember hiring one person when I worked in New York that had been in improv, and her personality was like so present and very good at that. And then I
Right.
also, in the same breath, hired this gal that had her master's in divinity, and she was wanted to work in marketing, but the
Yeah.
combination of them working together was
Yeah.
incredibly powerful. And I feel like that's an area where AI can't see the difference and feel the difference
Right.
of those humans and the way their chemistry and the combination of them. And
Right.
maybe at some point it'll get better at that, but it seems like we're still a long ways away from that. Whereas
Right.
an advisor or somebody on your team that's experienced can really understand the client's needs and find
And
that perfect
yeah.
fit,
Yeah.
in a way that the technology just never, probably ever will be able to.
Agreed. And it kind of takes me back when we were talking about degrees, undergraduate
Right.
studies, because when I moved to New York to work for that movie startup, there were salespeople and marketers that had degrees in film or in theater. And even recently when I hired someone out of college that had a theater background, I said, "Well, this aligns perfectly."
Right.
And just being able to handle, either public speaking, pressure, understanding, value propositions, things like that. So
Yeah.
it made me think back to what we were discussing earlier with degrees too.
Right.
And that's something that AI could, discount someone based on a specific type of degree, whereas you really have to be mindful of removing certain layers because you could miss out on some great connections.
Right. Right. So turning more specifically to marketing, as you think of 2026, which is like 5 minutes away, which
Yeah,
is crazy.
a good way to say it.
How did that happen? It
Yeah.
seems like it was just summer, just
I
started, in
know. We
fact,
we
right?
were just talking over the summer, Chris.
Right.
That's how I
Exact.
feel.
Yeah. What's on your mind about what to do differently, or what are you going to add to your plans for 2026?
Well, I think the way that we've been able to utilize our own self-built AI tool, this is not something that has been, commercialized or anything like that. I think that that's something we want to just lean into more for 2026, do more of, right? We've made some great strides this year in Atlanta. We're expanding with a second office opening in 2026. So
Right.
that's been on my mind as far as the way Atlanta is laid out. It's unique versus other major cities that has that sexy body of water that everybody wants to be around. It's not like that in Atlanta, where we're looking at where we can put our second office to support candidates, um, different partnerships we can lean into. We work with a lot of local educational institutions with talking about the emerging workforce and developing talent from that way. And so for me, it's like I want to do more of these things, and how can we lean more into AI tools to help us from an internal efficiency perspective?
Right.
Because as people, you only have so many hours in a day and you only have so much time to do the things you need to do. And conversations like this are so meaningful and irreplaceable in my mind, at least. I'm sure you agree. Like
Right.
these are irreplaceable. So when we look at what's left over in our day and the things we need to accomplish, how can we do more of
Right.
what we already have been displaying and showcasing, just in the broader Atlanta market?
Yeah. No, got it.
And where that second office is going to be, because I was pushing that off, Chris, like end of year. And now, like you said, 2026 is 5 minutes away,
Right.
and we need to figure out, where that second, space is landing pretty soon.
Right, right. Well, the good news is I imagine given the economy and stuff that there's probably pretty good options. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. Yeah.
not that it's cheap necessarily because everybody's trying to get the max for every square inch,
Very true.
but at least you'll
Very
have
true.
options. So whereas
But
there was a ton.
and I joke too with Atlanta, like, my history joke is Atlanta's been rebuilding itself since the Civil War. We've been in construction for 100 plus years,
Right,
and there's always some reason for construction. In the 90s, we had the Olympics, massive construction. Now we're hosting World Cup games next summer. This year, the city has been undergoing massive construction improvements and enhancements just to the infrastructure. So I've been lightly waiting and kind of looking and seeing, like, okay, there are just so many different pockets of the city. Let's use AI to look at some data and see some trends of where our candidates are, because more often than not, for us to have offices, it's for the candidates to be able to come in if they need to do any
right,
onboarding documents. Of course, I-9 and E-Verify, those are big pieces right now, and the type of, contingent temporary employees that are being used in Georgia. And then if we have any additional screenings like drug screening, background check, things that we need to push forward. So we'll be using some AI data to help determine, where that office space is going to be. But yeah, you're absolutely spot on. There are a ton of options right
right.
now.
Good stuff. So as you think of 2026, there's anything you're going to stop doing or discontinue in the marketing realm, particularly?
Hmm, that's a good question. I don't I don't think there's anything that we need to stop doing right now. Yeah.
Good,
That one gave me a good pause, Chris.
good.
I'm like, I don't really foresee anything that needs to stop in the sense of what we're doing right now.
Got it. Good.
Yeah.
Um, Most marketers have a long list of things they're working on. And there's also this list that's over on the corner of their desk that's the things they never seem to get to. Do you have a list like that? Or are there things that are on your list that you're just like, oh, I want to get to that. I just never seem to get around to it. Like,
Yes. So, my one of my own personal missions going into 2025 was I wanted to be able to share more of my own opinions and thoughts on a bigger stage and do more speaking engagements. And I have, as we mentioned, when this comes out, I'm speaking the end of October at a CMO Atlanta summit, and I did one at the end of May.
nice.
And I am a poor planner when it comes to my individual self. And my corner of the desk is usually my own mission projects, the things that I want to speak into existence. In 2026, I want to plan ahead and be able to participate in things like Digital Summit. I don't know if you've heard of Digital
Yep.
Summit. It's something I've enjoyed, and I've missed the mark this year on submitting because I love talking talent development, talent retention, and how we're developing, the current workforce, especially in marketing, right? That's a conversation for another day. But yeah, my corner of the desk is the things that I need to do to forward, my own goals and things I enjoy and to do more of, and to be continued from there. I like I
Yeah.
said, I'm speaking in less than 2 weeks, and I need to get that presentation. to get,
That's awesome. Yeah, I think everybody feels that pressure. Even if they've got it
yeah.
done, there's always that, what else could I add?
Right, right, to
Yeah, I
continue
know.
to fine tune it.
Yeah,
Right, they gave me an afternoon slot. I was like, "I really just wanna go first thing in the morning. I just wanna get it
right.
over with. I don't wanna
Uh,
be thinking all day at this conference about my afternoon talk." But these are also ways for me to grow as an individual in things like patience.
well, I hope you're
Um,
not right after lunch or right before cocktail hour, because those are
no.
deadly time slots. Good, good, good.
Agreed. I agree with you, Chris. No, I'm in neither of those. And then my husband told me, he's like, well, maybe this is a good thing as you're kind of ramping up and building out, and the fact that you don't have anything to share internally with our team to get eyes on, because of course I want to be able to review it and put my best foot forward if I'm representing Spherion.
Yeah, no, that's great. So as we look to the next, 2026, but even just like right around the corner, um, what's coming up for Spherion that you want our listeners to know? What big things are in the first quarter of the year?
Well, in the first quarter of the year, I mentioned that Sphere in Atlanta, we're supporting the 10 metro counties of Atlanta, and 10 metro counties is a quite a big spread. So we will be having that second location to be more accessible, and we are planning on participating and joining even more local organizations and partnerships. As I mentioned, we already have things established with different workforce development groups, chambers of commerce, foundations, some of which I serve on boards of, and I'm really looking to how can I help empower my own team to get out in Q1 of 2026 and join more of these organizations and have more of a presence in connecting with our community in Atlanta. And I'm sure it's like this in most cities, very community driven, and people want to do business and support other people, and that piece of it, AI, virtual, remote, you can't remove that element of it.
Right.
And so that's what we're planning on doing more of in Q1 of 2026 is, okay, let all the automation stuff do its job in the office, but how can we get out of the office and get more in front of more of our partners?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I love that. So, Aisha, you've had an incredibly interesting background all the way through and leading up to where you are now. So much so that Hollywood called and they're going to do a biopic on you. What's the name of the film, or who's going to play you, or what's the plot or theme?
The title would be Bad Decisions Make Good Stories. I I made a lot of bad decisions, but that ended up turning out right. So maybe a mix of a comedic melodrama
I love it.
where you want to root for the person, but you're also like, why do you keep self-sabotaging yourself? Yeah. Full circle there. I don't know if I've shared this with you prior to this conversation, Chris, but I moved 6 times in 6 years between Canada and the US, only to land on the same street I grew up on. My kids are in the same school district I went to, and that was not ever on my bingo card. I would have been voted least likely to ever go back to Lawrenceville, Georgia. However, I love it and I embrace it. And as far as who would play me, I feel a bit weird saying that. My favorite actress is Penelope Cruz. However, I don't know if we really look that similar. I just love her as an actress because she's really good at embodying very dramatic
Yeah.
roles. So I think she could do justice to my 20s.
I love it. I love it. Oh, that's great. Yeah, like you, I've moved a lot, and in some ways, I don't regret. I've lived in 10 U.S. states and overseas, and
Oh, wow.
and people are always like, "Were you in the service?" No, I'm not in the service. And I have personally no regrets, but I feel like there's definitely some you know I wouldn't say scars, but like scuffed knees along the way because that's a lot, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
even when you were talking about people management,
yeah,
I'm sure you have a lot of experiences, stories, situations that you probably asked yourself, "How did I end up here?"
yes, yes,
But then on the flip side, when you look at it from a different attitude, is like, "Wow, I ended up here,"
yeah.
and so I think that's the biggest piece of it when we look back is how did that happen? But I'm so glad it
Yeah,
did
for sure.
happen.
For sure.
Yeah.
Aisha, for those that want to reach out, connect with you, what's the best way to find you?
But well, they can take Aysha Abdullatif at Spherion.com and shoot me an email. I'm on LinkedIn and we can go from there. But I always love making new connections and seeing how I can help others in their career journey.
Awesome. Aisha, thank you so much for being with us today. Fantastic conversation. We could go on for hours, but we won't. We'll
Yes.
pause there and
We're
have
not
to.
gonna Joe Rogan this 4 hours later.
Exactly. I like it. I like
Thank
it.
you for having me, Chris. I really
Abs-
enjoyed it.
Absolutely. All right. With that, we'll wrap up another episode of Beyond the Brief. And until next time, thanks for the time.
Thank you.